Today we are looking at trigonometric word problems. So my essential question is, how do I find missing measures using trigonometry? Your learning intention. I'm learning to use trigonometry ratios to find the missing measures. You've got one warm-up question, but it's asking you to find all the trig ratios and to find the measure of both of the angles. So, pause the video and see if you can do that now. Well, I hope you tried. Remember, when using trigonometry, that SOHCAHTOA song. So means sine is the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine. So the cosine is the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. And the tangent, TOA. Tangent is the opposite divided by the adjacent. So using that, hopefully you were able to find the sine, cosine, and tangent. So the sine of x, here's my x. Sine is the opposite, 40, divided by the hypotenuse, which is 50. And I can simplify that to 4 over 5. The cosine of x. Cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. The adjacent is 30, the hypotenuse is 50. 30 divided by 50 simplifies to 3 over 5. And finally, the tangent is the opposite, 40, over the adjacent, 30, which gives me 4 over 3. I forgot the N on my tan. T-A-N. There we go. Now, how do we find the angle of the measure of an angle? We use one of the inverse buttons. So for x, I can do the sine inverse of 4 over 5. Second, sine 4 divided by 5, close it off, and I've got 53.13. We round to the nearest tenth. 53.1 degrees. It's approximately, it's not exactly. Okay, now to find that last missing measure, I think I will take 90 degrees minus 53.1 degrees, and what do I get? $36.9 degrees. We've found all the missing measures. Today we are looking specifically at word problems. So if you're looking at the angle of depression and angle of elevation, what do you notice? We know that these two are parallel. These two lines are parallel. We've got parallel lines cut by a transversal. What do we know about angle X and angle Y? The measure of angle X will be equal to the measure of angle Y because they are alternate interior angles. So let's get started. When you're doing trigonometric word problems, always draw the diagram if it's not given, so you can see what's going on. It says an airplane is flying at a height of 5,000 feet above the ground. If the angle of depression to the runway is 15 degrees, how far is the plane from the runway? So we know the height is 5,000. The angle of depression is 15 degrees. How far is it away from the runway? So this height is 5,000. If I draw that line of sight, this angle is 15 degrees. So this is also 15 degrees. Now what? Well, we need to decide. Are we talking about the hypotenuse, or are we talking about the measure that would be from the ground? If we were on the ground, which one are we talking about? Well, we'll find them both. So if we're actually looking at the distance itself, it would be that hypotenuse. This is my angle, this is my opposite, and I'm looking at my hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So the sine of 15 degrees is equal to 5,000 divided by x. Now, I've already explained to you the thought process of what you do when your variable's on the bottom. It's simply you will be doing a flip-flop here. Why? Because you multiply by x and then you divide by the sine of 15. So x is equal to 5,000 divided by the sine of 15 degrees. And what do we get? A big number. So x is equal to 19,318.5, and that would be feet. So that's how many feet it is from the runway. Okay, so if we're looking at the ground, if we're looking at y would be equal to, okay, this is your adjacent and hypotenuse, or opposite and adjacent. So the sine of 15, I started out wrong. The sine of 15 degrees is equal to 5,000 divided by y. Would it be the sine? Because this is your opposite and hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse is your tangent. Hopefully you caught that before I did. So the tangent of 15 is equal to 5,000 divided by y. Once again, you've got to flip-flop. Y is equal to 5,000 divided by the tangent of 15 degrees. And you get approximately 18,660.3. And that would be feet. So if you're looking at the ground distance itself, it would be 18,660.3 feet. If you're looking at the actual distance, it would be 19,318.5 feet. These two sides are smaller than your hypotenuse, so it does work. If you have any questions, back the video up and look at it again. Now, anybody that works in a business knows about the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disability Act states that places have to be accessible to people with disabilities. And for the ones that are in a wheelchair, you have to build a ramp. And the ramp has to have a angle of elevation that is less than, that has to be less than 4.8 degrees. So it can have a 4.8 degree incline. So if the slope of a ramp is 1 to 15, what is the angle of elevation of the ramp? Let's draw our ramp. Here would be our 90-degree angle. So 1 is the distance it goes up, 1 foot, for every 15 feet you run. Is that going to be less than 4.8 degrees? This is what I'm looking for. This is theta. Do I know anything about the hypotenuse? No. Do I need to know? No, I can use tangent. So the tangent of theta is equal to 1 over 15. Now, what do I use to find the angle measure? You use the inverse button. The tangent inverse of 1 over 15 will be equal to theta degrees. So, second tangent, 1 divided by 15. And I end up with 3.81. And so this one would work for anyone that has a disability. From a 250-foot observation tower on the beach, a man sights a whale in difficulty. The angle of depression to the whale is 20 degrees. How far is the whale from the shoreline? So here's this tower that the person is sitting on. Here's your whale out here. Whoops. I missed the whale, didn't I? We know that the tower is 250 foot. We know that the angle of depression is 20 degrees. If this one's 20, then this one is also 20 degrees. There's the x we want to find. Sine, cosine, or tangent. Well, my 90 degrees would be here. I know nothing about the hypotenuse, so it will be the tangent. The tangent of 20 degrees is equal to, the opposite is 250 divided by x. Once again, what do? Flip-flop. X is equal to 250 divided by the tangent of 20 degrees. And we end up with 668.86, which is about 268.9. $286. I read that wrong. 686.9. Now, for my sentence, the whale is about. I would round this up to 687 feet from shore. If you're having trouble, just make sure you back up and watch part of the video again. The angle of elevation from the top of a small building to the top of a larger building is 47 degrees. And the angle of depression from the top of the small building to the bottom of the taller building is 15 degrees. If the smaller building is 30 feet tall, determine the height of the taller building. So this is kind of a compound type of problem. If we're looking at it, the angle of elevation from the top of the small building to the top of the taller building is 47 degrees. The angle of depression to the bottom is 15 degrees. And we know the smaller building is 30 feet tall. So here is my smaller building. Here is my taller building. And what I know is that I've got to look at two pieces. Here's my first triangle. The angle of elevation is 47. So if I am looking at that angle of elevation, is 47 degrees. I will be able to find this piece here. So to find that piece, so for the second part, if we're looking down, the angle of depression right here is 15 degrees. So that means that this piece here is also 15 degrees. Now what? The other part we know is the fact that the bottom has to be 30 feet also. So take some time to think. How can we figure this out? Okay, the first thing you have to do is to figure out this length here. If I'm looking, I know that this would be my hypotenuse. So this is my opposite, and this would be the legs of my triangle. So for this piece here, I need to use the tangent. So I'm looking at the tangent of 15 degrees is equal to, this would be opposite over adjacent, 30 over x. Whatever x is here, this 2 will be that x degrees. I could call it y, because I already put x, but I'll just erase that x. Do your flip-flop. So the x is equal to 30 divided by the tangent of 15 degrees. And that will be an approximation when we get done. And that's 111.96, which is about 112 feet. So there's about 112 feet between the buildings. So now I'm going to look at this piece here. This is my top. This is 112 degrees. This is 47 degrees, and I am wanting to find y. Once again, I have to use tangent. So the tangent of 47 degrees is equal to y divided by 112. To undo, I multiply by 112 on both sides. (112) times the tangent of 47 degrees, and I get 120.1. Now I'm ready to solve. This piece here is 120.1. This is 30. What is my total height? 120.1 plus 30 is equal to 150.1 feet. So the building is about 150 feet tall. And how do you know when you're successful? I know I'm successful when I can use trigonometric ratios to find missing measures. And these are trig word problems.